I remember the exact moment I knew something was wrong with my heart. It wasn't the pain that told me, it was the silence. You see, for 75 years, my body had been a familiar companion, not a perfect one, mind you. My knees creaked when I stood too quickly. My back complained every morning until I'd had my coffee and moved around enough to remind it that we were still a functioning unit. My eyes had needed glasses for decades, but through it all, there was a rhythm, a constancy. The reliable beating of my heart had been the soundtrack to my entire life, so familiar that I never really heard it anymore. Until the day I couldn't hear anything else. It was a Tuesday morning in October, and I was sitting in the kitchen of my small apartment in Portland, Oregon. The apartment wasn't much, a one-bedroom on Hawthorne Street that I'd moved into 15 years ago when my wife Sarah died. Before that, we'd lived in the same house for 43 years, raised 2 kids, built a life. But after she was gone, the house felt like a tomb. Every corner held a memory I wasn't ready to face yet. Still haven't, if I'm being honest. So I'd packed up what I could fit, sold the rest, and rented this modest space above an organic bakery. The smell of bread in the mornings had been enough to convince me it was the right decision at the time. These days, I barely noticed it anymore. That October morning, I was making eggs. Simple scrambled eggs with toast, my usual breakfast. The sun was coming through the kitchen window in that particular way that only happens in the fall, all golden and slanted, making dust motes visible in the air. I was thinking about absolutely nothing important. Maybe the Mariners' season was ending. Maybe I was wondering if I should get milk at the grocery store later. Nothing earth-shattering. And then my chest felt tight. Not painful, not exactly. Not like what they show you on television, where a man clutches at his chest and cries out in agony. It was more like someone had wrapped a belt around my rib cage and was slowly pulling it tighter. And underneath that sensation, something else, a flutter, like a bird had gotten loose inside my chest cavity and was trying to find its way out. I set down my spatula. The eggs were starting to stick to the pan. The flutter continued. 3 beats normal, 1 too quick, then 2 slow. It wasn't painful, but it was wrong. I'd never felt anything like it before, and in that moment, I understood with complete clarity that something in my body had changed. Something fundamental had shifted out of alignment. I sat down at my small kitchen table and waited for it to pass. It didn't. I waited for 5 minutes, then 10. The eggs in the pan burned. The toast popped up and sat there, getting cold. And my heart continued its irregular conversation with itself, like a musician who'd suddenly forgotten the proper tempo of the song they'd been playing their whole life. That's when I should have called someone. I should have called 911. I should have done a lot of things differently. But what I actually did was pour myself a glass of water, throw away the burned eggs, and decide that I was probably just anxious about something and didn't realize it. 75-year-old men didn't have heart problems. Not me, anyway. I'd never been sick a day in my life. Never been to the hospital except when the kids were born. Famous last words, as they say. I tried to ignore it for 3 days. That's how stubborn I am, or stupid. People who know me might argue the terms are interchangeable. By the 4th day, I couldn't tie my shoes without getting winded. By the 5th, I was aware of my heartbeat at all times, that constant flutter-skip-flutter that had become the new bass line of my existence. My anxiety, which I'd convinced myself was the culprit, kept building. I started getting chest pains, real ones this time, dull and persistent, like someone was pressing on my sternum with the heel of their hand. On the 6th day, I finally broke down and called my daughter. "Dad, why are you calling me at work?" was how Jennifer answered. She was always cut from the practical cloth, no nonsense, always moving, always busy. I'd never understood where she got that from. Neither Sarah nor I were like that. We'd been the kind of people who took our time with things, who savored moments. Jennifer had always seemed to be in a race that no one else could see. "I think something's wrong with my heart," I said, and then I felt like an idiot because it sounded so melodramatic when I said it out loud. I was 75. Of course something was probably wrong with my heart, biologically speaking. It was getting old. I was getting old. "Have you called your doctor?" Jennifer asked, not unkindly, but with that tone that suggested I should have already done this and was therefore wasting her time with a stupid question. "Not yet," I admitted. Dad, call your doctor. Today, I have to get back to a meeting, but if it's actually serious, call 911. Don't mess around with this. I called the doctor. That same afternoon, they got me in for an appointment, which should have told me something about how seriously they were taking the symptoms I was minimizing. The doctor, a younger man named Rajesh Patel who'd been my physician for maybe 5 years, did an EKG in the office. I watched the machine spit out its little strip of paper with the squiggly lines on it, and even I could see that something looked wrong. The lines weren't smooth. They were jagged, anxious. "We need to get you to a cardiologist," Dr. Patel said, "as soon as possible." "What does that mean?" I asked, though I think I already knew. "It means we need to look at your heart more closely. You're experiencing arrhythmia, and until we understand why, we need to be careful." He got me in with a cardiologist named Dr. Alina Hassan for the very next day. That should have scared me more than it did. I was operating in a fog of denial so thick that I could barely see through it. Dr. Hassan was a woman in her early 60s, black, with close-cropped hair and the kind of direct gaze that made you want to be honest with her. I didn't like that about her immediately. I'd spent the last 15 years being good at minding my own business and not letting people see too far inside. She did another EKG, then an ultrasound. Then she sent me to the hospital for something called a cardiac catheterization, where they stick a tube up through your groin and into your heart to look around and see what's happening. I won't describe the procedure in detail. Some things are better left undescribed. When it was over, Dr. Hassan sat down across from me and didn't waste any time with warm-up. "Mr. Patterson, you have a severe blockage in your left anterior descending artery. There's also significant blockage in your right coronary artery. You're at very high risk for a heart attack. We need to do bypass surgery. Soon. This isn't optional." I remember thinking that her word choice was interesting. We need to do, not I recommend, or you should consider. We need to do, as if it had already been decided. "How soon?" I heard myself ask. "Within the week. Your condition is stable enough right now that we have a small window, but it could change at any moment. I want to schedule you for surgery on Thursday. That's 4 days from now." "Okay," I said, because what else could I say? I was 75 years old. I'd lived a life. Granted, I'd spent the last 15 years of that life in relative isolation, avoiding real connection, allowing myself to slowly disappear from the world. But still, I'd gotten some living in before that. The panic didn't hit me until I was driving home. I had to pull over on the side of the road, because suddenly it felt like I couldn't get enough air into my lungs, and I was terrified that this was it, that this was the heart attack they'd been warning me about, happening in my 1997 Honda Civic on the side of 82nd Avenue with nobody around to find me for hours. I called Jennifer back. "They want to do surgery," I told her, "Thursday." "Okay," she said. I could hear her thinking. Jennifer was always thinking. "I'll call Michael, we'll both try to be there." Michael was my son. He lived in Seattle with his husband David. They owned some kind of tech company together. I'd met David exactly twice. "You don't have to," I said, not because I meant it, but because I felt like I should say it. "Dad, don't be stupid. Of course we'll be there. I'll call you later with details." She did call later. She was efficient about it, asking me the logistics of the surgery, what hospital, what time, whether I needed her to take time off work. I answered her questions. She told me that Michael would fly down Wednesday evening, that she'd pick him up, that they'd meet me at the hospital Thursday morning. "What should I expect?" I asked her. "Recovery takes a while. But people do this surgery all the time, Dad. You're going to be fine." I wanted to believe her, but I remember hanging up the phone and thinking that she'd said it with the same tone she used when she was reassuring herself, not when she actually believed something. I knew my daughter. I recognized the performance of confidence when I heard it. The next 3 days passed in a strange fog. I went through the motions of preparing. They'd sent me instructions about what to eat, when to stop eating entirely, what medications to stop taking. I showered with special antibacterial soap they'd given me. I laid out what I would wear home from the hospital, an old sweatshirt and elastic waist pants. The kinds of things you wear when you're expecting your chest to hurt too much for anything with buttons or zippers. I thought about calling people. I had a few friends, people I'd had coffee with over the years, neighbors, a book club I'd joined and then quit because it felt like too much effort to keep up with other people's expectations. In the end, I didn't call anyone. It felt dishonest to suddenly reach out after months of minimal contact just to warn people that I might be dead within a week. I sat in my apartment and I thought about Sarah. I thought about the early days of our marriage, when we were young and stupid and in love. I thought about the children when they were small. I thought about the house we'd built together, the modifications we'd made to it over the years as our family changed and grew. I thought about the night she died, how she'd been in the hospital for 6 days before her cancer finally decided it had taken enough from her. How she'd looked at the end, diminished, reduced to a being of pure will that just kept refusing to let go. I'd thought I'd been there with her, but had I? I'd been in the room, but was I really present? Or had I been somewhere else, somewhere safer, somewhere that didn't require me to witness the actual machinery of her dying? I didn't have good answers to those questions. Thursday morning, I woke up at 4 a.m. and couldn't fall back asleep. My stomach was empty. I'd fasted since midnight following instructions. My mind was full of everything else. I got to the hospital at 5:30 a.m., which was too early. Jennifer was already there in the waiting area, looking exhausted. She hugged me, which wasn't like her. We weren't a huggy family. We were the kind of family that showed affection through competence, through showing up, through doing things for each other rather than expressing things verbally. This hug said everything that she couldn't find words for. "Michael's in the bathroom," she said. "He got here at 3 a.m. He didn't want to sleep." Good kids, I said, and meant it. Whatever else I'd screwed up in my life, I'd managed to create 2 people who actually cared about me. That was something. Michael came out of the bathroom and hugged me too. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him, which had been Easter, maybe 6 months ago. He was my youngest, and in some ways, he was the one who'd been the most openly angry at me during the years after Sarah died. Jennifer had understood, in that practical way of hers, that I needed space. Michael had seen it as abandonment. They were both here anyway. They called me back to pre-op, and Jennifer and Michael weren't allowed to go with me. I changed into the hospital gown, a backwards affair that always makes you feel exposed and vulnerable, even though it's supposedly for your own comfort. A nurse put in an IV. Another nurse came by to confirm my identity about 17 times. A resident showed up to explain the surgery one more time, even though I already knew the basic outline. They were going to crack open my chest, harvest a vein from my leg, and use it to bypass the blockages in my heart. "Any questions?" the resident asked. I wanted to ask him if this was the last time I'd be conscious. I wanted to ask him if he believed in anything bigger than this, anything that existed outside of the body and its mechanical failures. I wanted to ask him what happened to a person when they died, if anything happened, or if there was just a light switch that got flipped from on to off. Instead, I asked, how long will I be out? The surgery itself takes about 4 to 5 hours. You'll be in recovery after that. You'll be groggy for a while. Your family can see you this evening, probably, though you might not remember much of it. Okay, I said. Then Dr. Hassan came by. She was already in her surgical scrubs, and she seemed somehow smaller in them than she had in her regular clothes. Or maybe I was just feeling smaller, and it was scaling everything around me down with me. "We're going to take great care of you," she said. She meant it, I could tell. That was the thing about Dr. Hassan, you always knew exactly where you stood with her. She wasn't the kind of person who lied to make you feel better. She told you the truth and expected you to deal with it like an adult. "I'm in your hands," I said. They wheeled me down to the operating room. I remember the lights in the hallway, so bright and clinical. I remember the feeling of being transporting, moved along a path that I hadn't chosen. There was a strange resignation in it. I'd ceded control of my body to other people. All I had to do was let it happen. The operating room was colder than I expected, bright, full of beeping machines. There were at least 8 people in there, all focused on me. Someone was adjusting my IV. Someone was putting stickers on my chest. Someone was putting a mask over my face. "We're going to give you something to relax now," an anesthesiologist said. He was a man with kind eyes. "Just breathe normally. You're going to feel a little warm and then you'll fall asleep. When you wake up, the surgery will be done." I remember thinking that he was lying, not maliciously, but nobody who's about to go under anesthesia actually just falls asleep the way people describe it. It's not like going to bed. It's more like being erased. Your consciousness doesn't fade gradually. It just stops. One moment you're aware. The next moment you're not, and for you, no time has passed at all. I've heard people say that dying is probably like that. A sudden cessation. An ending without an ending, because how can you experience your own ending? You can experience coming close to it, but not the actual moment when the switch gets flipped. The warm feeling came, I remember that, and then nothing. When I woke up, nothing made sense. My chest hurt, not dully or in a vague way, but with a white-hot intensity that seemed to encompass my entire body. I opened my eyes and saw things without understanding them. Tubes, monitors, a woman's face. Her mouth was moving. Was she talking? I couldn't hear anything. Or maybe I could and my brain just couldn't process it. "Mr. Patterson, Robert, can you hear me?" My mouth was dry. Had they left it open? I tried to move my hand, but it didn't seem to belong to me anymore. Nothing did. I felt like a person occupying a body that wasn't mine, piloting an alien craft that was all wrong in every possible way. "You're in the recovery room. The surgery went very well. You're going to be fine. I need you to try to breathe slowly and not panic. You're on a breathing tube, but we're going to remove it very soon." A tube in my throat. I wanted to gag, but I didn't have that power either. My body belonged to someone else now. I was just a consciousness trapped inside it, aware but unable to affect anything. This is what hell is, I thought with strange clarity. It's not fire or demons or any of that. It's being locked inside your own body with no way out. Time passed, maybe an hour, maybe 6. The pain was still there, but I'd started to adjust to it. My body had begun to feel like something that belonged to me again. I could move my eyes. I could feel the breathing tube in my throat. I could understand that I was alive, that the surgery had happened, that my heart was still beating beneath the surgical bandages. A nurse whose name I didn't catch came and started talking to me. "We are going to remove the tube now. It's going to be uncomfortable, but just try to relax." She removed it. My throat felt like she'd scraped it with a razor blade. I coughed, and the coughing hurt my chest so much that I almost passed out from the pain. "That's normal," she said. "The pain will get better. You're very strong, Mr. Patterson. Dr. Hassan said everything went perfectly." "Jennifer," I managed to croak out. "Michael. They've been here all day. They're in the waiting room. I'll let them know you're awake." My children came in. Jennifer looked like she hadn't slept. Michael had tears in his eyes, which startled me. I didn't think of Michael as someone who cried, but there he was, standing next to my hospital bed, crying. "Dad," he said, and then didn't seem to know what to say after that. Jennifer took my hand very carefully, mindful of the IV and the various wires attached to me. "You're okay," she said. "You made it through." "How long was I out?" I asked. My voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "About 6 hours, Jennifer said. "You came through it great. Dr. Hassan said everything went exactly how she wanted it to." I remember smiling at that, even though it hurt. There was something amusing about the image of a surgeon getting what she wanted from other people's bodies, but I was too exhausted and pained to explore the thought. "You need to rest," Jennifer said. "We'll be here, both of us. We're staying." And they did. For the first 2 days after the surgery, at least one of them was there. I moved between sleeping and waking, between pain and medication-induced numbness. The world seemed very far away. I would drift off and dream things that didn't make sense, dreams where the mechanics of my body were visible to me, and I could see the surgical repairs my doctors had made, could see the vein they'd harvested from my leg, now functioning in new pathways through my heart. On the 3rd day, I woke up, and something had changed. I couldn't see anything. At first, I thought it was the darkness of sleep, The darkness you see when you're half-conscious and haven't opened your eyes yet. But when I tried to open my eyes, they were already open. I could feel them open. But there was no light, no change, no acknowledgement of the world around me. Jennifer, I said, I was in the hospital room. I could hear the beeping of monitors. I could feel the presence of someone else in the room. I'm here, Dad, she said. She was sitting in the chair beside my bed, the one that had become her permanent post. I can't see, I said. I said it as a statement, not a question, because I already knew it was true. Something had happened while I was asleep. Another system had failed. The doctor said that can happen, Jennifer said calmly. After major surgery, sometimes your body does weird things. Vision problems are not uncommon. They usually resolve themselves. How long? I asked. We don't know yet, but they're monitoring you closely. I remember the strange feeling of betrayal. My body had just been given a second chance. They'd fixed my heart, and now something else was broken. It was like being given a reprieve only to realize that the reprieve was temporary, that the fundamental unreliability of being human, of being old and falling apart, was still the name of the game. I didn't tell them how terrified I was. I'd never been good at expressing that kind of fear. Instead, I lay in the darkness and felt it move through me like water, cold and inevitable. Dr. Hassan came by later that morning. I heard her voice before she spoke to me directly. I'm told you've lost your vision, she said. No preamble, that was Dr. Hassan. Yes, I said. I want you to know that there are several possible causes, most of which are temporary. It could be a medication side effect. It could be inflammation. It could be related to the anesthesia. We're going to run some tests to determine the cause, and in the meantime, I want you to try not to worry too much. Try not to worry, I repeated. I know it's not easy, but panicking is going to increase your blood pressure, and that's not good for your recovery. So I'm going to ask you to trust me when I say that we are going to figure this out. And if we don't, I asked the question into the darkness, what if this is permanent? There was a pause. Dr. Hassan wasn't the kind of person who lied, but she was also smart enough to know that there were some questions that didn't have good answers. Then we'll figure out how to help you adjust to that, she said finally. But right now, we have no reason to believe it will be, so let's focus on what we can control, which is doing the tests and finding the cause. Over the next 3 days, they did the tests. They did an MRI and a CT scan. They had neurologists come in and shine lights in my eyes and ask me questions and test my reflexes. Nobody could find anything obviously wrong with me, which was somehow worse than if they'd found something they could fix. And then on the 4th day, I woke up and I could see again. Just like that, one moment I was in the darkness, and the next moment, the dim shapes of my hospital room resolved into actual objects. The window, where afternoon light was coming through. Jennifer, asleep in the chair beside my bed, her head tilted at an uncomfortable angle. A machine that was monitoring my heart rate, the line moving up and down in a regular pattern. I wanted to cry, but I was too tired for crying. Instead, I just lay there and looked at the world, grateful for its existence, humbled by how easily it could be taken away. Jennifer, I said quietly. She woke up immediately, the way parents do, instantly alert, ready for crisis. What is it? She asked. Are you okay? Do you need the nurse? I can see, I said. Of course you can see, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Your eyes have been open for, oh my God, you couldn't see. I couldn't, but I can now. She reached over and pressed the call button for the nurse, and the next few hours turned into a flurry of activity. The doctors wanted to know everything about when the vision returned, whether there had been a gradual improvement or a sudden change. They ordered another round of tests. They seemed baffled and intrigued in equal measure, which I suppose was better than them being concerned. By the evening of that day, Dr. Hassan came by and delivered her assessment. We don't have a clear explanation for why your vision returned, she said. We've reviewed all the tests and there's no evidence of stroke or neurological damage. My best guess is that it was related to inflammation or a medication reaction that has now resolved itself. I'm going to recommend that we adjust your medication regimen slightly, but overall, I think you're going to be just fine." "Just fine," I repeated. "You're going to need about 6 to 8 weeks of recovery," she continued. "You'll have restrictions on what you can do physically. You'll need cardiac rehabilitation. But yes, I believe you're going to have many more years ahead of you." Many more years. I was 75 years old, and I'd just spent the past 4 days thinking that I might be dying or going blind. The idea of many more years seemed almost overwhelming. That night, after Jennifer had gone back to the hotel where she and Michael were staying, I lay in the darkness of my hospital room and thought about second chances, about the fact that I was being given another opportunity at something, though what that something was, I couldn't quite figure out. The next day, they started talking about discharge. I was progressing well, they said. My heart seemed to be healing properly. My blood work was good. There was no medical reason to keep me in the hospital any longer. "What about the vision thing?" I asked Dr. Hassan. "My best guess is that whatever caused it has resolved," she said. "If it happens again, you need to come to the emergency room immediately, but I expect it won't. And if it does, then we'll deal with it then." I was discharged on a Tuesday morning, 9 days after the surgery. Michael and Jennifer drove me back to my apartment. They helped me up the narrow stairs, both of them hovering like I was made of glass. I was still sore, still moving slowly, still afraid of my own body and what it might do next. "I'm staying for another week," Michael said. "David can handle things in Seattle for a few days." "You don't have to," I said, and I was lying again. I didn't want them to go. "We are staying," Jennifer said firmly, "and David can come down if Michael needs to be here longer. This isn't something you navigate alone." That evening, they made dinner in my small kitchen. It was strange, having them both there, moving around the space like a normal family. We'd never done this much, not since they were children. As adults, our interactions had been brief, mostly centered around holidays that we didn't always celebrate together. The last time we'd all been in a room for an extended period had been Sarah's funeral. We sat around my small kitchen table and ate lasagna that Jennifer had brought from a restaurant on the way home. Michael had a glass of wine. I was not allowed to have wine or alcohol of any kind, so I had water. Even water was monitored these days. They didn't want me having too much fluid because of the strain it could put on my recovering heart. "You could have died," Michael said suddenly. He was on his second glass of wine, and the filter between his thoughts and his words was becoming less effective. "Michael," Jennifer said warningly. "No, I'm serious," he continued. "Dad could have just died, and we wouldn't have known until he didn't show up to something. He could have been alone in this apartment and just gone." "But he didn't," Jennifer said. "He called us, he got help." "After 3 days of ignoring it," Michael said. He was looking at me now, and I could see years of accumulated frustration in his eyes. "How many times have you done that? Just ignored things, ignored us after Mom died?" I set down my fork. The lasagna suddenly seemed inedible. "I did my best," I said quietly. "That's not good enough," Michael said. "We did our best too, and you pushed us away anyway." "Michael, stop," Jennifer said. "Why?" he said. "Why do we have to pretend everything's fine? Dad checked out after Mom died. He gave up on us, and we've spent 15 years trying to be okay with that." There was a silence after he said it. The kind of silence that fills a room when something true has been spoken and nobody knows how to respond to it. "You're right," I said finally. "I did give up, not on you specifically, but on everything, on life, on the idea that there was any point to continuing to try." "And now?" Michael asked. "I don't know," I said. "Right now, I'm just trying to figure out how to breathe without it hurting." Michael's anger seemed to deflate a little at that. He took a long drink of his wine. "Sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to." "It's okay," I said. "You're not wrong." After dinner, Michael went out for a walk. Jennifer stayed behind and helped me into bed. She adjusted the pillows around me carefully, making sure I was in a position that didn't strain my chest. He's been angry for a long time, she said, tucking a blanket around me. I know, I said. It's not your fault, though. Grief is a solitary thing. I could have let him in, I said. Instead of pushing everyone away, I could have let him in. You were doing the best you could, Jennifer said, echoing my own words back to me. That's all any of us can do. Is it, I asked, or is that just what we tell ourselves when we fail? She didn't have an answer to that. She kissed the top of my head, which she hadn't done since I was small, and went to her hotel room to sleep. Michael stayed for 2 weeks. Jennifer had to go back to work, but Michael worked remotely, so he set himself up at my kitchen table with his laptop and didn't leave. He cooked. He drove me to my cardiac rehabilitation sessions. He sat with me while I watched television. It was profoundly uncomfortable at times, and yet I found myself grateful for it in ways I couldn't express. He asked me about Sarah one afternoon. We were sitting on my small porch, and the November air was cool and wet with the promise of Portland rain. What was she like? He asked. I mean, I know what she was like, but what was she like for you? I thought about that question for a long moment. Sarah had been dead for 15 years. In that time, I'd tried very hard not to think about what she was like for me specifically. It had been easier to just store her in my mind as a finished thing, a chapter that had ended, not engaging with the question of what I'd lost, what her absence meant. She was steady, I said finally. She was the steady one. I was always the one who wanted to run off and do impulsive things, and she was the one who would reel me back in. We balanced each other out. And after she died, there was no one to balance me anymore, I said, so I just collapsed inward. Without her counterweight, I didn't know how to function. We were here, Michael said. It wasn't accusatory this time, just sad. You were, I agreed, but I couldn't see it. I was too far down in my own hole to see anything. And now I don't know, I said. I've been given this thing, this surgery, this second chance, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. Michael was quiet for a while, then he said, maybe you don't have to figure it out right away. Maybe you can just be here, be present, and let the rest figure itself out. It sounded simple when he said it, but simplicity, I was learning, didn't mean easy. Before Michael left to go back to Seattle, he made me promise something. He made me promise that I would stay involved, that I would call them, that I wouldn't disappear back into my apartment like some kind of hermit. I promised. I meant it at the time. Whether I'd keep that promise, that was something else entirely. Rehabilitation turned out to be its own form of torture. I went to sessions 3 times a week at a facility attached to the hospital. There was a physical therapist named Susan who seemed to have a philosophical belief that pain was good for you, that the more it hurt, the better the progress you were making. Just push through it, she'd say as I walked on a treadmill set at what felt like an impossible incline. Your body is stronger than you think it is. My body was not stronger than I thought it was. My body was a traitorous entity that had nearly killed me, and now I was supposed to trust it to get stronger. The logic was perverse. But I did the exercises. I walked on the treadmill. I did the weights. I did the stretches. I monitored my heart rate constantly, terrified that the monitors on my wrist would beep and alert Susan to the fact that my heart was doing something irregular again. It never did. My heart, after the surgery, seemed determined to be the most obedient organ in my body. 3 weeks after my surgery, I had a complication that wasn't actually a complication. I was standing in my kitchen, making coffee, when I felt a weird sensation in my chest. Not pain exactly, but a pressure, a heaviness. For a brief moment, my mind went to the worst place it could possibly go. My heart was failing. I was having a heart attack. I was going to die right there in my kitchen with my coffee maker half full of water. I sat down. I called Jennifer. She talked me through breathing exercises while she arranged to drive over. When she got there, I was sitting on my couch, my pulse racing, convinced that I was dying. Do you want to go to the ER? She asked. I don't know, I said. Maybe I'm just panicking. Let's call Dr. Hassan. We called Dr. Hassan. She told me to come to the hospital. They ran an EKG. They did blood work. and they found absolutely nothing wrong with me. You had a panic attack, Dr. Hassan said. Your heart is fine. This is actually very common after surgery. People become hyper-aware of their bodies, and every little sensation becomes a crisis in their mind. So I'm just crazy, I said. You're not crazy, she said. You just went through a major trauma. Your body and your mind are still processing that. But the thing was, I didn't feel like I was processing anything. I felt like I was just existing in a kind of holding pattern. The days went on. Winter came. I did my rehabilitation. I took my medications. I was still alive, which was more than I could have said a month ago, but I wasn't sure it amounted to actually living. Michael called every few days. Jennifer came by once a week. They were checking on me, I realized, making sure I didn't slide back into that dark place, making sure I didn't just disappear into myself again. One afternoon in December, I was sitting in my apartment and I found myself looking at old photo albums. I hadn't looked at pictures in years, but there they were, in a box in my closet, documenting a life that felt like it had happened to someone else. There were pictures of Sarah when she was young. We must have been in our 20s. We were at the beach somewhere, and she was laughing at something I'd said. I could remember the moment. I'd made a stupid joke about a sandcastle, but I couldn't remember how that felt, to be someone who made jokes that made someone else laugh like that, who was confident enough to be silly. There were pictures of the kids when they were born. Jennifer as a newborn, looking angry even then. Michael as a toddler, covered in chocolate, grinning at the camera. There were birthday parties and Christmases and summers at the beach. There was evidence of a life lived, of a time when I'd been present, when I'd cared deeply about the people around me, when I'd been invested in their existence and their happiness. When had I stopped being that person? Was it gradual, or was there a specific moment when something broke? Was it the moment Sarah got sick, the moment she died, or was it something smaller, something I'd overlooked? I was looking at these photos when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Jennifer came by Thursdays. Michael called on Tuesdays. It was Monday afternoon. I answered the door, and for a moment, I didn't recognize the woman standing on my porch. "Hello, Mr. Patterson," she said. "You probably don't remember me." And then I did remember, or at least some part of me did. I'd seen her before, though it took me a moment to place where. "You were at the hospital," I said slowly, "during my surgery." "I was," she said. "I'm Dr. Hassan's colleague. May I come in?" I didn't understand why she was at my door. There was no medical reason for a doctor to visit a patient at home unless something was wrong. But I let her in anyway, suddenly anxious again. We sat down in my living room. She had kind eyes, this woman, dark skin, dark hair, middle-aged, professional. She was looking around my apartment with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm here informally," she said. "This isn't an official visit. Dr. Hassan thought you might benefit from talking to someone, and I specialize in postoperative psychiatric care." "I'm not crazy," I said, echoing what I'd said to Dr. Hassan. "I know you're not," she said, "but you've been through something profound, something that statistically 20% of people don't survive. You're one of the lucky ones, but that luck doesn't negate what your mind and body have been through." "So what do you want me to do?" I asked. "I want you to tell me what you're thinking about," she said. "When you're sitting here alone, what goes through your head?" I thought about lying, about telling her that I was fine, that I was adjusting well, that the surgery had given me a new lease on life, and I was grateful for it. But something in her expression suggested that she would see through a lie, and for some reason, I couldn't be bothered to make the effort. "I think about dying," I said. "I think about the fact that I almost died. I think about how easily it could have happened and how nobody would have known or cared for a while." "Do you think that's something to be afraid of?" she asked. "Dying. Specifically, dying alone, unknown." I considered the question. "I think I've been dying alone for 15 years, I said. "Dying by inches in this apartment. At least if I'd had a heart attack, it would have been quick." She didn't respond to that immediately. She just watched me with an expression of professional compassion. "Why did you stay?" she asked finally. I don't know, I said. After Sarah died, the house felt too full of her. It still does, even though I'm not there anymore. So I came here where there were no memories and I could just exist. But existence isn't the same as living, she said. No, I agreed, it's not. So what would living look like for you at this point in your life? I didn't have an answer. I realized that I'd spent so long in survival mode, so focused on just getting through each day, that I hadn't thought about what I actually wanted. What would make a life feel worth living? I don't know, I said. That's the honest answer. I don't know anymore. She came back the next week, and the week after that. We fell into a routine of talking. She would ask me questions, I would try to answer them. Slowly, through these conversations, I started to articulate things that I'd kept buried for years. The guilt about Sarah. I hadn't been the best husband at the end. I'd been present but distant. There was a part of me that had started to grieve her while she was still alive, as if preparing myself for the loss was a way to make it less painful when it came. It hadn't worked. When she died, the pain was as overwhelming as if I'd never prepared for it at all. And then, after she died, I couldn't forgive myself for having spent her final months in a kind of emotional retreat. The confusion about my relationship with my children. I had loved them. I did love them. But I'd convinced myself that they were better off without me around, that my presence was a burden to them. It had never occurred to me that they might want me around anyway, that they might be grieving too, grieving the loss of their father even while he was still alive. The fear that I was simply a fundamentally broken person, that some essential component of me was faulty, that I'd never be good at being in relationship with people, that I was destined to be alone, and that was simply the nature of who I was. Do you believe that, my psychiatrist, that was what she'd become, essentially, through our informal arrangement, asked me one afternoon. I don't want to, I said, but experience suggests it's true. Experience suggests that you made some choices, she said. Isolation, retreat, avoidance. These were choices you made, probably for good reasons at the time, but that doesn't mean they're fundamental truths about who you are. So you're saying, I can change. I'm saying that you already have changed. You called for help. You got the surgery. You're still here, still alive. That's different from who you were a year ago. Over the next few months, slowly, my life began to shift. I started leaving my apartment more. I went to my rehabilitation sessions. I added another day to my weekly schedule at the cardiac center. I started going to the farmer's market on Saturday mornings, something I hadn't done in years. At first, I was just going to buy vegetables, but then I started talking to people. The woman who sold the bread, the man with the apples, small conversations, nothing momentous, but real nonetheless. Michael called one day in January. How are you feeling? He asked, as he always did. Better, I said. Actually better, not just saying better. That's good, he said. David and I were wondering, would you want to come up to Seattle for a week? We have a guest room. It's been too long since you've been here. My first instinct was to make an excuse. I was still recovering. The travel would be difficult, but I'd spent 15 years making excuses, and I was tired of it. I'd like that, I said. So I went to Seattle. My son and his husband picked me up at the airport, and it was awkward at first. David barely knew me. Michael and I had some rebuilding to do, but slowly, over the course of that week, we got there. David was a kind man, it turned out. He was interested in my health in a way that didn't feel intrusive. He cooked elaborate dinners. He and Michael clearly had a good partnership, built on affection and respect. Watching them together, I realized what I'd missed in my children's adult lives. They'd built real things. They'd created lives that mattered. On my second to last day there, Michael took me to Pike Place Market. We were walking through the crowds, and he took my arm as I was navigating a tricky patch of uneven cobblestones. The gesture was simple, but it undid something in me. My son was being protective of me, he was taking care of me, and I was letting him. I'm sorry, I said, there in the middle of the market, with the fish sellers shouting behind us and tourists pressing past. For what? He asked. For the years I wasn't here, for leaving you to grieve Mom alone, for checking out. I'm sorry too, he said, For being angry, for holding it against you. You had a right to be angry. I did, he said, but I'm not anymore. Mostly now I'm just glad you're here, that you're still alive. We bought fresh crab and went back to the apartment, and David made crab cakes, and we sat on their balcony overlooking the sound and ate and talked. It wasn't a magical resolution. It wasn't suddenly all better, but it was a beginning. When I went back to Portland, something had shifted in me. I called Jennifer and told her I wanted to come see her. She seemed startled by this, which told me how long it had been since I'd asked to be in her life. She lived in a nice house in the West Hills with her husband Robert. Yes, we both had the same name, which had always been confusing, and their teenage daughter, Emma. I hadn't been to the house in years. I'd met Robert maybe twice. I barely knew my own granddaughter. But I went, and I started going regularly. Every other Sunday, I'd drive over and have dinner with them. Emma was 14 and had opinions about everything. Her parents were concerned that she was being difficult, but I could see that she was smart and thoughtful, just testing the boundaries of the world to figure out where she fit. She reminded me of Michael at that age. "Why are you here?" Emma asked me during one of my visits. No preamble, no social niceties, like grandfather, like granddaughter, apparently. "Because your mom invited me," I said. "Yeah, but why do you come? You didn't even talk to us for like a decade." "Because I made a mistake," I said, "and I'm trying to fix it." "Can you even fix it?" she asked. That was the question, wasn't it? Could you undo 15 years of absence? "I'm not sure," I said, "but I'm going to try." From that day on, Emma seemed to warm to me a little. She'd tell me things about school, about her worries, about a boy she liked who didn't seem to like her back, and I would listen, really listen, in a way that I hadn't listened to much of anything in a very long time. My psychiatrist, her name was Dr. Patricia Chen, helped me see that this was a form of healing, not just for me, but for my whole family. They'd been waiting for me to come back, and now that I had, it was opening possibilities that I'd thought were closed forever. Spring came, the rain stopped, and the sun came back to Portland. My heart was strong. My recovery was complete, at least physically. Dr. Hassan discharged me from active cardiac care, though I'd need to continue my medications for the rest of my life. "You've done remarkably well," she said at my final appointment. "Your heart is functioning well, your blood work is good. You've followed all the recommendations about lifestyle and exercise. You should have many good years ahead of you." "That's twice you've told me that," I said. "I'm starting to believe it." She smiled. "Believe it, you earned this second chance." I left the hospital that afternoon, and for the first time since the surgery, I felt like I could actually breathe. Not just the physical act of breathing, but the metaphorical kind, like the weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long had finally lifted. But this is where my story should end, maybe. The man survives the surgery. He reconnects with his family. He learns to live again, happily ever after. Credits roll. Except that's not where the story actually goes. 2 months after Dr. Hassan discharged me, I got a call from Jennifer. She was crying, which was unusual enough that it immediately put me on alert. "It's Mom," she said, and my heart did a strange stutter. "What about Mom?" I asked, confused. Sarah had been dead for 15 years. "We found out she's still alive," Jennifer said. "She's not dead, Dad. She never died. She's in a care facility in Eugene, and she's been there for the last 15 years, and nobody told us." The world went very still. "What?" I said. "That's not possible. I was there. I was there when she died." "No," Jennifer said, and she was crying harder now. "You were there when she went into a coma, but she didn't die. She went into a long-term facility, and somehow, all these years later, we're just finding out about it." My mind couldn't process what she was saying. The woman I'd spent the last 15 years grieving, the woman whose loss had shaped the last 15 years of my entire life, was alive. "How is this possible?" I asked. "I don't know," Jennifer said. "There's something very weird going on, but she's alive, Dad, and I think we need to go see her." So that's what we did. Jennifer drove, and I sat in the passenger seat, trying to make sense of a reality that had suddenly shifted beneath my feet. Michael met us there. He drove down from Seattle. We went to a care facility called Sunbrook Manor, which was a nice-looking place with a manicured lawn and big windows. The director of the facility met with us. She had a carefully neutral expression on her face, the kind of expression people use when they're delivering bad news. "Your mother, Sarah Patterson, has been a resident here since 2009, she said. She was admitted on November 15, 2009, following a traumatic event that resulted in severe brain damage." "What kind of traumatic event?" I asked. "There's an accident report on file," the director said. "From what I understand, she was struck by a car. She was hospitalized for several weeks, and when she recovered enough to be discharged, she was placed here because of the extent of her injuries. She required full-time care." "And nobody called us?" Jennifer asked, her voice sharp. "Nobody contacted her family?" "According to the records, admission was authorized by a healthcare proxy designated by Mrs. Patterson, someone named Margaret Walsh." Margaret Walsh. The name hit me like a physical blow. Margaret was Sarah's sister. Sarah's estranged sister, who Sarah hadn't spoken to in years, not since some bitter argument in the 1990s that I'd never fully understood the details of. I'd only met Margaret a handful of times, and we'd been polite but cold to each other. "We need to see her," I said. "We need to see our mother." They took us to her room, and when we walked in, I understood, in the space of a single breath, that the life I'd been living for the past 15 years had been built on a foundation of lies. Sarah was sitting in a wheelchair by the window. She was thin, diminished, aged beyond her actual years, but it was undeniably her. The curve of her jaw, the shape of her hands, the way she was looking at the window as if trying to see something beyond it. "Mom," Jennifer said, her voice breaking. Sarah didn't respond. She didn't turn around. She didn't seem to register our presence at all. "She's been unresponsive since admission," a nurse told us quietly. "There's severe neurological damage from the accident. She's not in pain, as far as we can tell, but she's not conscious in the way we typically think of consciousness. She exists in a kind of persistent state." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I stood there looking at the woman I'd buried in my mind 15 years ago, and I couldn't process the fact that she was real, that she was there, that she'd been there all along. Michael reached out and touched her arm gently. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "It's Michael. I'm here. Jennifer's here, and Dad." Sarah didn't respond. What unfolded over the next few days was a mess of bureaucratic and emotional complications. Margaret had guardianship over Sarah. Margaret had the authority to make medical decisions. Margaret had been paying for Sarah's care, which I found out had been substantial money that could have been used to support Sarah's actual family, but instead had been used to keep her existence a secret. When we finally reached Margaret by phone, her response was defensive. "Sarah wanted it that way," she said. "After the accident, she said she didn't want her family to see her like that. She said she wanted them to remember her the way she was." "She was in a coma," I said. "She couldn't possibly have said that." "She was conscious enough," Margaret snapped. "For a few weeks, she was conscious enough to talk, and she made it clear that she didn't want you to know what happened to her. She didn't want you to see her that way." "You had no right to make that decision for us," Jennifer said, and she was furious in a way I'd rarely seen her be. "I had every right," Margaret said. "I had power of attorney, I had legal guardianship, and my sister trusted me to do what was best for her." We consulted a lawyer. Over the next month, it became clear that Margaret had acted within her legal authority, which made our outrage irrelevant from a legal standpoint. She could keep us away if she wanted to. She could prevent us from having contact with Sarah. She could, technically, claim that Sarah was thriving under her care and had no need for family involvement. But after some negotiation, she agreed to let us be involved. I think she realized that fighting us would only create more problems for her, and perhaps, somewhere deep down, she understood that what she'd done was wrong. The question I couldn't escape was simple. Had Sarah really wanted this? Or had Margaret interpreted Sarah's instructions in a way that served Margaret's own purposes? I'd never know the answer. Sarah's accident had happened after her consciousness, and everything Sarah might have intended was now filtered through the question of what constituted meaningful communication from someone in her condition. I spent the next weeks going to see Sarah at Sunbrook Manor. I'd sit with her for hours, sometimes talking, sometimes just sitting in silence. I told her things I'd never been able to tell her while she was alive and responsive. I told her that I was sorry, that I'd failed her in those final years, that I'd missed being a partner to her, being present with her. I told her about the surgery, about nearly dying, about the strange gift of being given a second chance at life. "Maybe this is my real test," I said to her one afternoon. "Maybe nearly dying and coming back was supposed to teach me something, and maybe you coming back, in a sense, is part of that lesson, that things aren't over when you think they are, that there's always another chapter." She didn't respond, of course. She never responded. But I kept talking anyway, because talking to her felt important, like it mattered even if she couldn't hear me. That fall, I made a decision that surprised me, because I was surprised to discover that I was capable of making decisions anymore. I asked Margaret if I could move into one of the assisted living facilities connected to Sunbrook Manor, not to spy on her or to take over Sarah's care, but because I realized something fundamental. I had time left in my life. I didn't know how much time, but I had some, and I didn't want to spend it alone in an apartment, running away from the world. Margaret was suspicious at first, but I think she eventually understood that I wasn't trying to undermine her or take something away from her. I was just trying to be closer to my wife, in whatever way was now possible. So I sold my apartment. I gave away most of my things, and I moved to a small one-bedroom unit at Sunbrook's Assisted Living Center. My room had a view of the gardens. I was 50 feet away from Sarah. My children thought I was crazy. "You don't have to do this," Michael said when I told him. "I know I don't," I said, "but I want to." "She's not going to know you're there," Jennifer pointed out. "I know that too," I said, "but I'll know it, and I think that matters." Jennifer and Michael came down for a weekend to help me move. We packed up what was left of my life into a small space that was clean and bright and full of other people. It was strange being around so many other old people. There were activities scheduled, meals served in a common dining room, nurses walking around to make sure nobody fell or had a medical emergency. But there was also community, people my age who had similar stories, people who'd lost things, people who were figuring out how to age without losing their dignity. I made some friends, a woman named Iris who'd been a teacher and had opinions about books, a man named Harold who'd been a carpenter and liked to sit outside and watch the weather. We'd have coffee together. We'd talk about our lives and our losses and the strange experience of being old and still alive. I visited Sarah every day, twice a day, actually. I'd go in the morning and again in the afternoon. I'd sit with her and I'd read to her. I brought in records of music we'd loved when we were young, and I'd put them on a small record player I'd salvaged from my apartment. I'd play Ella Fitzgerald and Chet Baker and Duke Ellington, and I'd watch Sarah's face to see if there was any reaction. Most of the time, there wasn't, but once, I'm almost certain, I saw her eyes move toward the speaker. Once, I could have sworn I felt her hand tighten slightly around my fingers. Dr. Chen, my psychiatrist, came down to Sunbrook to see me. She was delighted to see where I'd moved, and she spent an afternoon walking around with me, looking at the gardens and meeting my new friends. "You've built a life," she said approvingly, "an actual engaged life." "It's not the life I thought I'd have," I said. "Whose is?" she asked. "We plan one thing, and then existence decides to surprise us in directions we never anticipated." "Do you think she knows I'm here?" I asked her, gesturing toward the building where Sarah's room was. "Does it matter?" Dr. Chen asked gently. "You're here, you're present, that's what matters, isn't it?" And I suppose she was right. A year after my heart surgery, I had another minor heart incident. Nothing serious, just a flutter, A skipped beat that sent me to the ER out of an abundance of caution. They ran tests. They found nothing wrong. They sent me home with a reminder to avoid stress and get exercise. I was sitting in my room at Sunbrook afterward, feeling frustrated that my body was still finding new ways to betray me, when Michael called. "How are you feeling?" he asked, as he always did. "Fine," I said. "It was nothing." "Good," he said. "Listen, David and I wanted to tell you something. We're thinking about having kids. I mean, obviously not biologically since I'm gay, but we've been looking into adoption and foster care, and we wanted your blessing." I felt something shift in my chest, and this time it had nothing to do with my heart condition. "You're going to be a parent?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, "if it works out. We've been thinking about it for a while, but after seeing how you are with Emma, how you're involved now, it made us realize that we wanted that too, that experience of being a family." "I would be honored," I said, "honored to be a grandfather again." "And I was thinking," he continued, "that maybe when the baby comes, if the baby comes, you could come up and stay with us for a while, not to help with the diapers necessarily, but just to be there, to be present." "Yes," I said immediately. "Yes, absolutely." After we hung up, I sat there in my room, looking out at the gardens, and I cried. Not the kind of crying I used to do, the silent, anguished kind that came from deep despair, but the kind of crying that comes from gratitude, from the realization that at 76 years old, I was being given yet another second chance, not to fix the things I'd done, but to do things differently moving forward. To be present for the next generation, the way I hadn't been able to be for my current one. I went to see Sarah that evening. "Michael's going to be a father," I told her, "and Emma's growing up to be an amazing young woman, and Jennifer is solid and strong, and somehow, despite my best efforts to ruin everything, our family has survived. More than survived. It's actually kind of thriving." I sat with her in the gathering darkness of the autumn evening. Outside the window, the light was fading into that particular gold that only happens in October. "I don't know what comes next," I said. "I don't know how much longer I have, but I know that whatever it is, it's better than what I had a year ago. You gave me that in a weird way. Almost dying gave me that. Or maybe you almost dying when I thought you were dying gave me that. I don't fully understand the mechanics of it, but I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful for you even if you can't hear me." She didn't respond, but I didn't expect her to, and that was okay. That was more than okay. That was actually exactly where I needed to be. 2 years after my heart surgery, at the age of 77, I received a diagnosis of cancer. Early-stage prostate cancer, caught on a routine screening. It was survivable, treatable, the doctors said, but it was still cancer. Another reminder that my body was still running the clock down. I had the surgery. It was less dramatic than the heart surgery, less likely to kill me, but still significant. Still a reminder that the more years you accumulate, the more opportunities you accumulate for something to go wrong. Michael and David's first foster child arrived while I was recovering, a little girl named Lucy, age 3, who'd had a hard start to life. Michael sent me pictures. She was small and serious and wary of the world. I recognized that look. I'd seen it in myself. But over the months, as I received updates and then visited Seattle, I watched her slowly learn to trust, to play, to be a kid. Jennifer's daughter Emma graduated high school. She was planning to major in biology in college. She wanted to work with marine animals. When she left for college, she hugged me goodbye, and I realized that I'd been present for a significant portion of her adolescence. I'd been a grandfather, not a perfect one, but a present one, and that meant something. Sarah remained in her state, unchanged. Her body kept functioning, even though her mind had checked out years ago. The doctors said she could live like this for years, or she could get an infection and decline quickly. We lived in a kind of liminal space, waiting for something that might never come, honoring a woman who couldn't be honored in the traditional sense. I visited her every day. I talked to her. I read her the news. I complained to her about my aches and pains. I told her about the grandchildren she would never meet, not in any meaningful way. And slowly, I came to understand that this was my penance and also my grace. That showing up for her, being present with her, was how I could finally do right by her after all those years of doing wrong. And then one day, in the spring of the year I turned 78, something remarkable happened. I was visiting Sarah in the afternoon. I was reading to her from a novel we'd both loved years ago, The Light Between Oceans by M.L. Stedman. It was about people separated by circumstance, about love that transcends time and absence. I'd chosen it deliberately because I thought somehow it might reach her, might touch some part of the person she used to be. I was mid-sentence, reading about one of the characters returning home, when Sarah's eyes opened. Not just opened, focused. She was looking directly at me. I stopped reading. I stopped breathing. "Sarah," I said. Her mouth moved. Her lips formed a shape that looked like it might have been a word, but no sound came out. "It's okay," I said. "Don't try to talk, just rest. I'm here with you." I pressed the call button for the nurse. A woman named Patricia came in. Her eyes opened, I said, and I was trembling. She was responsive, she was looking at me. Patricia checked Sarah's vitals, did all the things nurses do. She seemed cautious about getting my hopes up. "Sometimes that happens," she said. "Patients who have been in vegetative states for long periods can have moments of apparent consciousness. It doesn't necessarily mean anything has fundamentally changed." But something felt different. Sarah's eyes, when they opened again, had a quality of awareness to them that I hadn't seen in years, and when I held her hand, I felt her grip me back. Over the course of the next week, Sarah slowly began to return to the world. It was a gradual process. Her consciousness flickered in and out at first. Sometimes she was aware and responsive. Sometimes she seemed to be gone again, but the periods of awareness began to lengthen. The doctors were mystified. There was no medical explanation for what was happening. Her brain scans hadn't changed. Her blood work was unchanged. But somehow, inexplicably, she was waking up. Michael and Jennifer both came down. They saw their mother's eyes open and focus. They heard her voice, rough and disused, but undeniably their mother's voice, whisper their names. "Mom," Jennifer said, and she was crying. "Oh my God, Mom, we're here, we're all here." Sarah's eyes moved to each of us. I saw the moment of recognition. I saw the moment she understood where she was and what had happened. And I saw the moment when the weight of all those lost years crashed down on her. "Don't cry," I told her, even though I was crying. "Don't try to process it all at once, just rest. We're going to figure this out. We're here now." And we were. For the first time in 15 years, we were all there, present and accounted for, a family reunited by something that didn't have a logical explanation. Something that fell into the category of grace, of miracle, of the inexplicable kindness that sometimes the universe extends to people who have been broken. Over the next months, Sarah's recovery continued. It wasn't a complete recovery. The damage to her brain was real, and it had permanence. Her speech was sometimes unclear. Her memory of the years before the accident was fragmented. Her mobility was limited, but she was there, she was conscious, she was present. And for me, watching her rebuild herself in those months, something in me rebuilt too. We sat in the gardens at Sunbrook, Sarah in her wheelchair, me in the chair next to her, and we talked. Real conversations, though they required patience because her speech came slowly. "How long?" she asked me one afternoon. 15 years, I said. "You've been here for 15 years. "Where was I?" she asked. "Somewhere we couldn't reach," I said, "but you came back." She looked at me for a long moment, and her eyes, though damaged, were still the eyes of the woman I'd loved for 53 years. "I remember you being sad," she said finally. "At the edges of things, I remember you being so sad." "I was," I said. "I am sorry for that." "Don't be," she said. She reached over and took my hand, and her grip was weak but real. "You stayed, you came back, that's what matters." In the fall of that year, we had a wedding. Michael and David had decided to make their partnership official, and they wanted to do it with family present. Lucy was their ring bearer. Emma was a bridesmaid. Jennifer coordinated everything with typical efficiency. And Sarah, who'd been given a second chance at life and at being present for her family, sat in the front row and cried happy tears. I wore a suit that hadn't fit me in years. I'd lost weight, or maybe I'd just learned how to stand differently, how to carry myself with less of the weight of the world on my shoulders. Watching my son marry his partner, watching my family be joyful and present and real, I thought about how close I'd come to missing this. How, if the doctors had been even slightly less skillful, if the surgeon's hands hadn't been steady, if some very specific moments of chance hadn't aligned just right, I would have died on that operating table. And if I'd died, I would have gone to my grave not knowing that Sarah was alive. I would have spent whatever time I had left in the afterlife, if there is an afterlife, if there's anything at all, knowing that I'd given up, that I'd let her go, that I'd abandoned my entire family to their grief. But I didn't die. I was given the gift of survival, of a second chance, of the opportunity to do things differently. At 79 years old, I sit in the gardens at Sunbrook Manor and I watch the seasons change. I visit Sarah every day. Some days are better than others. Some days her mind is sharp and present. Some days she slips back into confusion. But she's here. She's alive. She's part of my life again, and I'm part of hers. Michael and David are raising Lucy with the same intentionality and presence that I lacked with my own children. Jennifer has become an even more steadfast and present person, dedicated to her family and her work. Emma is in college, thriving, becoming her own person. And me, I'm still figuring out who I am in this second act of my life. I'm making friends here at Sunbrook. I'm volunteering, helping other residents navigate their own health crises and existential questions. I'm learning to be present, truly present, in a way that I wasn't for much of my life. Some days I think about the man I was before the surgery, the man who was slowly disappearing, who was allowing himself to be erased by grief and isolation. I don't blame that man. I don't judge him harshly. He was doing his best with the tools he had, but I'm grateful I'm not him anymore. I don't know how much time I have left. The doctors tell me the cancer is in remission. My heart is stable. I could live another decade, or I could be gone tomorrow. This is the strange gift of almost dying. You stop taking your continued existence for granted. And in that uncertainty, I've found something unexpected. I've found gratitude. I've found that life, even a life full of pain and loss and regret, is still precious. That being alive, being present, being part of a family is worth all the sadness that comes with it. The doctors told my family that they were gone, that I was done, but I came back, not the way they might have expected, not fully recovered, but back nonetheless. And in coming back, I've learned that it's never too late, that second chances are real, that the people we love and who love us are willing to meet us wherever we are on our journeys. That family doesn't disappear when we disappear, it waits. It grieves and it hopes, and it waits for the possibility that we might return. Sarah reaches over and takes my hand. Her grip is still weak, but it's there. Real, present, the grip of someone who's come back from the edge just like I did. "Thank you," she says quietly. "For what?" I ask. "For coming back," she says, "for not giving up." "I'm not the one who should be thanked," I say. "You're the miracle here." She squeezes my hand. "We are both miracles," she says. "We just took different routes to get back to each other." I think about that as we sit in the autumn sunshine, about how the universe works in mysterious ways, about how the things that nearly destroy us can also be the things that save us if we're willing to let them. I almost died, but I didn't, and in surviving, I've learned how to live. That's the real second chance, not the surgery, not the miraculous recovery of my wife, but the knowledge that it's never too late to show up for the people you love, that presence matters, that being here, being now, being fully embodied in the moment is the whole point of being alive. So I sit with my wife in the garden, I hold her hand, and I'm grateful for everything, the surgery, the recovery, the time, the second chance. And mostly, I'm grateful to be alive.